This approach shares some features with the kind of research you do in terms of predicting, experimenting, and testing. How does this relationship improve the learning experience in your class?
Again, I can't emphasize enough the active portion of what experiments bring to the classroom. Students are up and they're engaged in the material. In economics, there's an interesting opportunity for students to be both the subjects of the experiment and the experimenters themselves. So they're playing the role of both lab rat and scientist, if you will. And so they spend time in the first portion during the experiment itself in class actually being the subjects. They're the ones making the decision. It's their behavior that we're keeping track of and making notes of in the spreadsheet or on the board. And then later on, they come back and play the role of researcher as they analyze that experience and that behavior. Another thing that I think is really beneficial to the approach is that it gives students an appreciation for the dynamics that are involved in moving from one equilibrium to another. We talk a lot, especially at the introductory level, about equilibrium situations in economics and not a whole lot about disequilibrium situations. And a lot of that material is probably too advanced for an introductory course, but this gives them a bit of appreciation for the fact that moving from one equilibrium point to another may not be a nice, smooth process.
Are there any drawbacks to this approach?
I think probably the biggest drawback, or maybe I would call it a trade-off, that is involved in using this approach is just the time that it takes. Experiments are definitely more time-consuming to construct in terms of preparing for class. They're more time-consuming to administer in terms of the amount of material that you can cover in a particular class. And they're more time-consuming to administer after the fact, keeping track of the homework assignments that students are working on and so on. I think from the student's perspective, it's really a question of breadth versus depth of information. And I think that having experienced this material in this way, in this very active way, is probably better for students in terms of giving them a better appreciation in terms of depth, but it does necessarily come at a sacrifice in terms of breadth. Our hope is that we can use this approach and this hook to get students excited about the material, and we do draw in majors from our introductory courses, and maybe this is a way to get students interested in coming to major in economics or maybe minor in economics and take a few more courses, and then they can get the breadth that way.